The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show. Today, we're having a very special roundtable discussion on a topic that affects all leaders and change agents, how we navigate generosity and animosity in times of change. So change is a constant in business and life, and I think we're seeing a lot of that now. But why do some people embrace it while others resist it? And how can leaders remain self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and effective when facing resistance? So to explore this, we have an incredible panel of experts joining us today. Let's go around the room and have each of you introduce yourselves and share a bit about your work in leadership and change. And I also want to ask you to share why you think this conversation is important now, especially with the emotional challenges society is facing. And we've got the growing impact of AI on jobs, and there's economic uncertainty, and just a broader need for human connection in times of disruption like that. So let's start with Jose.
Start with me? I thought we were going to start with Lisa. She's more important. My name is Jose Leal. I been doing this, I can't remember, but it started with Doug a few years ago, reaching out and having a conversation around, for me, I'd done 6 startups and got acquired, got into corporate, did 10 years as VP and went, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I quit the industry, I quit the job, and really just sort of went and hid off for a little while until I could figure out what it was that I wanted to do with myself. That led me back to California, back to the Bay Area, got introduced to Doug, have no idea how, but thank God I did, because it really just changed the way that I started thinking about how we were going to deal with this. I was thinking that we needed to fix the organization and fix the way we were doing the organization. And over the last, it's too many years to count, it's been a bunch of years, I've come to the realization that what we need to do is really rethink how we've organized society and our structures and the way we see ourselves in life. As Tullio said earlier, I'm the philosopher in the group. And I think that we need to really rethink humanity before we can even think about how to organize organizations. And so it's how do we dig deeper? That's interesting to me. The topic is critical. Change is always happening, right? We talk about change as if it's a thing that happens periodically, right? And so how do we even recognize that change is a constant and understand that change is a part of life, not a part of the story we call our systems? And that's where I think the two fight. It's, we think of change or talk about change from a story perspective, the structures, the ideologies, the concepts, and forget about the humanity and the life before it. So that's what I'm here about.
I love it. I could geek out on this for a while here. Let's go to Lisa first to introduce herself.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. I'm Lisa Brazelton. I would consider myself to be a very passionate entrepreneur. I have about 30 years, started 8 companies, and that turned my journey into just absolutely loving what I do now, which is coach and consult executive leaders. And as I was saying earlier, I think that it is in the space of, as a leader myself, and I'm happy to, I guess, not to be managing people anymore because it's a very lonely place to be. It's hard to be a leader. And I would say even harder today with all the things that, we mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast, and to take a different approach to why this conversation is important. And I think that when we can take a step back and understand how to cultivate our consciousness and start to have some awareness and understand the emotional journey that individuals are on. And as we encounter all these, the technological shifts and dynamic changes that are happening within the workplace, and maybe there's talent shortages and just expectations of the different generations that are working together. As Jose said, this change is a constant, it's fluid. And how can leaders navigate this fluidity that we call change? And I think it's through having emotional awareness. And that emotional awareness is how I define it as is being aware of the emotional internal drive that happens. And I call this like, how do we have emotional literacy? And once we understand how to have emotional literacy, that is where I think new leaders in this next, I'll use the word new earth, the new way of doing business is actually going to be one that brings about higher consciousness through the tools of things like intuition, different spiritual sciences. And it's about time we have the conversation. So I think it's very timely. And I think more and more people are open to new ways in which to lead. And we're at a very critical juncture right now in humanity. And I love Greg Braden's way in which he talks about that we have to remember our humanness, regardless of AI's rapid change that we are all experiencing. When we can understand that the importance of our humanness, then we can tap into the innate gifts that I think we all have, and to really cultivate that and to use that within business as team, as leaders. So I'm excited about the conversation.
Yeah, I love it. Especially, I mean, you're talking about really, we know where consciousness is going, and that was kind of, you're talking about like the future of consciousness and how more and more of us are really going to come up to some of those traits that you're talking about, like having empathy for where people are at in their consciousness journey. So this is going to be great. Doug, let's go to you.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. It's great to see Jose again and to meet Lisa. I'm Doug Kirkpatrick. I learned my business skills at a startup called Morningstar here in Northern California in the 1990s. Morningstar is a high-tech, high-volume food processing company. We grew from zero to become the largest tomato processor in the world, $1 billion company with thousands of colleagues. No one is referred to as an employee. Everyone is a leader. There are no bosses, no managers, and no titles, no command authority. So now I speak, write, and consult on the future of work and organizational self-management, giving people tremendous amounts of freedom and autonomy, coupled with accountability. And one of my great experiences was a podcast I did with Bliss Business Podcast. And I love the acronym Bliss. It's building love into scalable systems. And so I've been wrangling with the question of what does love have to do with work for over a couple of decades now. And I'm now also deeply involved in the tech world, designing systems that allow individuals and teams to communicate at scale without having to have meetings. So getting past the idea of scalability challenges is a huge focus of mine at the moment. So I liked the show notes and the conversation direction, talking about the emotional challenges. You know, we like to think we're unique. In some ways, yes, but in many ways, no. We've had incredibly horrific disruptions in the world. And think about the Civil War. America had 5% of its population were casualties or killed in the Civil War. It'd be 16 million people today in terms of the population size. Somehow we survived and made progress and got through that. And so in some ways we are unique, in some ways we're not. You talked about AI and the challenge of AI. Well, AI is doubling its power every 3 to 4 months. We've never seen anything like that in human history. Moore's Law and hardware was 24 months. So that is incredible. You can see the change every month as you use AI tools. So the exponential change is it's going to have a huge impact on the world of work. Will employment as we know it even exist 10 years from now? Big questions await. And so if you want economic certainty, you're living on the wrong planet. We don't have that. It will never exist. We need to embrace the uncertainty and step into the chaos. And so I like what Lisa was saying about emotional intelligence, awareness. We need human connection. If you're not able to connect in a positive way to your fellow human beings, the people with whom you work, it's going to be a long, lonely life. And so we need to foster those connections, nurture them, and make the best world of work we possibly can. So that's me.
Yeah, I know, Doug, you had mentioned you have no boss at your company, but then I remember on your podcast is like purpose is the boss, right? Is what you kind of mentioned as, I mean, that really resonated, I think, with a lot of people. Mike, where do you want to kick us off to?
Well, I was sitting here and I was just really appreciating how calm and everyone's tone. I don't know if anybody really noticed that or took that in, but just really like the pace, the thoughtfulness into what everyone was saying there. And so I hope just to call that out. And so for our listeners, so
yeah, put it on 1x speed. You're going to be listening. A lot of people are like 2x speed, and so yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was beautiful.
Dosage of peace.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was sitting here thinking, what is my purpose? But I think now I've found my purpose on this show, and that's to kind of like shake things up and help pick up the pace. So yeah, maybe if we want to turn things over a little bit to the emotional complexity that comes with change. Tullio, maybe you can lead us into this topic, right? Obviously, we know that change doesn't just change processes; it kind of stirs emotions. Just as we were talking about before the show, look at the stock market today, right? That is all about emotions. So some people lean into them; others, they put walls up and get very guarded. And one of the things, Tullio, I thought you did really beautifully in your article, Generosity and Animosity, was exploring how some can help that change can provoke resistance, right? And so those walls go up. So maybe talk with us for a little bit about the concept that you came up with, your bread of shame concept, and how that plays out in the real leadership settings that we're seeing today.
Yeah, thank you. The concept of bread of shame is actually a pretty old, ancient concept. And it's similar to that saying that we often hear: you give someone a fish, they'll eat for today. You teach them how to fish, and they'll eat for a lifetime. And the concept is that when you give someone a directive in business that they did not have an opportunity to have agency or participate in or contribute or impact, you're setting them up to actually feel a sense of shame. And it's so subconscious because it's almost like a child that has no say, and the parents just do this because I said so. And they subconsciously feel a sense of shame because they are not having an opportunity to participate, to flex their own agency in the matter, to be able to have an impact, to give meaning to what they're doing. These are all intrinsic things that we need as human beings. We need the opportunity to have an impact. We need to be becoming. We need to have meaning behind what we're doing. We want to belong to something greater than ourselves. So when change is being directed from the top down, it's the same concept. It's like giving someone bread that they didn't earn it. It did nothing for us. There's a sense of shame. I didn't do anything for this. I didn't even try. And so it's a terrible experience. And most people don't realize they're feeling that way. That's why they get resistant and upset. But they're actually feeling subconsciously a sense of shame. And it's shame that was brought onto them because they were not part of the process. They were not brought in. They didn't get to use their agency. And so recognizing the pattern is challenging, but it's really the first step to enabling good transformation. And to break free from these patterns, it really starts with awareness, significant self-awareness. And the awareness is being able to ask yourself those really difficult questions that sometimes might rub your ego the wrong way. Like, what is it about this person's behavior that is triggering me? Is it an insecurity that I have or a limitation within myself that I haven't yet acknowledged that they're mirroring for me? Am I resisting because it feels uncomfortable or because it feels threatening? What can I learn from this moment and how can I apply it in my own personal and professional development? These are really difficult questions to ask ourselves, because in that moment we step into agency. We're taking responsibility for what's going on. We're no longer a victim of the shame that's been brought upon us. So there's this dance that happens. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations are set up in such a way that don't give people agency. And so people living with the shame and don't know what to do about it. And they're angry a lot of time and disconnected and disengaged. So learning how these things come up for leaders could help them to maybe rethink how they're introducing change, where maybe they're needing to have more collaboration, more agency across the organization. And then for those where this is happening, to be able to identify the root cause of how they're feeling is important too. And so that's what triggered this article. It's like so much change, it could either trigger generosity or a sense of gratitude, or animosity or a sense of like, get away from me.
Yeah. It's a question for all of you. So have you experienced unexpected resistance when leading change? And what did you learn about managing really that generosity and animosity in those moments? I know, Jose, you've talked about some of what Tullio described. I almost used to call it like violence, right?
Yeah, force is what I like to call it, because in general it is. So I was part of 6 rounds of reorg at the organization that I was VP for.
Wow.
And 6 rounds over 10 years, it's pretty quick change. And that, for the most part, meant at the top as well as on the bottom organizational. We were part of the .com era, and so a lot of that kind of change. And Stephen, I do call it force now. It's something that Doug and Tullio are familiar with, because it came to me as sort of this personal insight, and it's, I know a lot of other people who think of it this way, but for me it was the recognition that what we don't like about change isn't change. It's the lack of control. That if we're in control, it's not change. We're doing it, right? And when you're a leader who's going, I need to make this change, you're doing it. So for you, it's not change, right? It's just something that needs to be done. But when you're communicating that to others, and to them it feels like force because they're not part of that process, they're being forced into some action. And that's when change doesn't work. Change isn't accepted. Change isn't easy. It's only because of force. It's not the actual aspect of changing things. It's not that we went from A to B. That's the problem. It's that you went from A to B and you didn't let me be part of that process of going from A to B. I wasn't in control. And so that to me is really the juxt of what we're talking about. If we're talking about change as a whole, it only matters if I'm engaged and have some agency, as Tullio points out. But if I'm not, then it's not really change, it's force. That's my insights on that.
Yeah, Lisa, you coach leaders. I'm sure there's a lot of resistance even in the coaching, but when they go through this process too, what did you learn maybe about managing or helping people get through the generosity and animosity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel that, there's this delicate balance, right? And I really appreciate, Tullio, I appreciate the article. I also appreciate that we have the opportunity to take ownership of the things that happen to us. I do believe that everything is based on the things that we think and feel. And when we become authentic with ourselves and own our emotion and where it stems from, we stop projecting. And so when I'm working with clients, there is humility. I do believe in intellectual humility. I think that to be an amazing leader, we have to imbue this humility that can be a wonderful, I don't want to say it's a tool, but it really is the best way to lead. It's the most incredible way to lead, because it is leading with empathy. It is leading with intentionality. It is leading with communication. And in my experience of being a leader, I had very little resistance, because I really believe that inclusiveness is the key to success with any organization. And this collaboration, like generosity through collaboration, I think is one of the best ways to counterbalance animosity, because there is a transparency that people feel included. And I really don't coach very many people that are resistant to that. They really want to know, how can they become the best leader? And it all starts with self. How can we be the best version of ourselves? It starts from within. It's an internal journey. And when we become not only just aware of it, but really truly embrace it, then the things that we can say, hey, as a leader, this may be uncomfortable. Team, company, right? This may be, our change may invoke something. I think a leader to be able to listen, and listening is not hearing. Listening is being quiet, being present. And people don't quit companies, they quit people. And I've heard that before, but it's true. People have the ability to become the best version of themselves. And I'll tell you, when leaders are at their most transparent, I think it could be one of the most pivotal points within an organization, to have people stay and to really work together and commune. So I think, I hope I answered the question, because there's so much here, really. But I think it's just understanding this emotional landscape that we first have to foster within ourselves. And then we can really understand others.
I love that you brought up humility in this for so many reasons. But for me, like wherever someone is consciously, I think it's best to try and get as close to love as you can. Just that will be the healthy place wherever you are consciously. But if you want to grow, I think humility is really the key to growing there. And otherwise, yeah, change will help you grow and it'll be very painful, extraordinarily painful, because, you know, you're going to get slapped upside your ego on some of this stuff. And I think, you know, a lot of leaders really need to double down on humility in that process. So I love that you brought up, Doug, how about this issue of, you know, resistance and, you know, managing the generosity and animosity? How's that start?
Yeah, so I thought of an experience I had was probably in the early 2000s, and I was implementing the first online 360 for Morningstar colleagues, and I had a deadline. It had to be ready by the 1st of December, and I recall that you know, I had the coders complete the forms, and we were ready to roll it out and announce it, and some stakeholders popped up and said, you know, we weren't really consulted on this, and we don't really support what you're trying to do here, and had already invested the time and the coding and design and the communication strategy, and so had to kind of just stop and halt and involve the stakeholders that had the objections and make sure that everyone understood what we're doing before we could go forward. And so that was a good lesson about being, as Jose said, open, and as Lisa said, being more inclusive. And so I'm a great, huge believer in agency, and that starts with including people in decisions that affect them, and including the voices of people who can contribute to the quality of decisions that are made. Always. And so that's a great principle on which to stand. My Morningstar experience also taught me about the importance of principles. And so one of the first principle of Morningstar, as Jose knows, is people shouldn't use force against other people. And that's the foundation of all law everywhere in the world. We know it's the most important principle of human interaction, because if you imagine a world where everyone aligned with that principle, we wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. And of course, that's not reality, but that's not the point. The point is, the closer we can approach that idealistic state inside an organization, the more space we open up for happiness and teamwork and performance and all the great things of life. So if we start with principle, and we, in essence, create a container in which people have to drop their guns, they have no authority to direct other people, then they have to develop natural leadership skills. And they have to accomplish everything by request and response. And so we take away the directive that Tullio mentioned in the opening, and we remove the lack of agency, and we reduce the shame, and we create space for people to disagree, to have open conversations, to say no if that's what's important. So there's a great opportunity for organizations, leaders, to start with principle, so they aren't always having to cogitate over, you know, am I using the best approach or wording or communication style in trying to get something done through other people.
Nice.
I love that. You know, and you mentioned, like, society kind of growing toward using less and less force, and it may not seem like it right now for people, but really, if you do step back, you know, and you got to step back maybe decades, centuries, but if you just look at the progress, we have made progress, and it's not always evolution's not always pretty, but it is beautiful, I think. And when you can make that progress. Mike, where do you want to go from here?
Actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead,
Stephen, I was just going to add a little bit to that, because I don't think we have to go that far back. You know, I was born in Portugal, and as a kid, I remember like I had to kiss the hand of my godfather, the priest, the town doctor, as a child. That was sort of the thing, that these people had so much power over the community, and what they said went. We forget how much we've, in the past, in the recent past, imbued on people in our society, teachers, mayors, and so on and so forth, that it isn't about the fact that force is something physical. It can be about simply making you think that they have all the right answers, and you have to listen to them and only them. So sorry to interrupt, but
No.
Yeah, it reminds me of the baby elephant story.
Mhm.
It's tied to a pole, tries to break free, can't do it. Baby elephant becomes a giant behemoth elephant. Doesn't even try because it thinks it can't. That's the story you told me reminds you of. That's the baby elephant who becomes a giant elephant, but still acts like a baby because it doesn't know it has any agency.
Can I say something here? Because I really love where the conversation is going. I think, Jose, thank you for saying that. There is a change that's happening where a new conversation around sovereignty is being talked about. And for us to, as leaders, to really help employees and teams and individuals in whatever capacity we can, to empower everyone to know that they have the choice to create the life that they would like. And a lot of work that I do with clients, we do take a journey around childhood, because it's always important to know where are certain programs and limiting patterns and beliefs, where do they stem from? And they do stem from typically either ages 1 to 7 or 7 to 14. And the 7 to 14 time frame is really where our emotional defensive mechanism kicks in. So, and much of it, especially depending on the age of, where people are in their life, the preachers, the teachers, the peers, the media, the parents, all have an influence. And when we can learn to really see where it stems from, not to revisit it, but to know that there is a way in which we can uncoil those constructs that we have created to make us feel unempowered. And I think it's a very important conversation, especially leaders, because we are not our titles. We are not the money that we've made. We are not our roles and responsibilities. I think that we are eternal souls coming here to have a pretty extraordinary human life experience. And with that narrative, we get to choose how we want to write, direct, produce, and be an actor within our story.
It's very interesting what you're saying, Lisa, about the early beliefs. They become hardwired. And a lot of times leaders will try all these things. The strategy's good, everything looks fine, but they can't seem to get past a certain point because their belief doesn't allow them to. It's one of the reasons I've adopted neuroscience techniques in my coaching, because you have to go back and create a new synapse in the brain. Like you have to rewire that belief, or you're never going to get past it. It's so limiting. It's like that elephant. It doesn't matter whether you have the ability. If you don't believe it, you're not going to go past that point.
Yeah. And thank goodness neuroscience is. I'm also studying neuroscience at King's College. And I think it's a wonderful way. Again, this is that we're understanding how the limitless capacity that we have is really being brought into fruition through the study of these wonderful sciences like neuroscience. So thank you for listening.
Yeah,
it's interesting. We have this sort of ritual at work, since we do a lot of remote work, where we just call it story time, where we just get together because we miss those water cooler, moments being remote. And a few of us got into, it was 3 of us who were fathers, and we got into the relationship of fathers and sons. And also we are fathers, and then we were also sons, and we were talking about the trauma of that, and how you get programmed at a certain age, and you put up your defenses, and you kind of hardwire, like Tullio mentioned. And then as you grow older, if you're lucky, you can recognize how that has impacted you, and you can uncoil or rewire to that extent. But we were just having that conversation yesterday. Mike,
we have very enlightening conversations around here.
It was very enlightening, for sure.
This is a water cooler. This is our water cooler conversation yesterday.
Exactly. It makes
and I said,
like,
someone's going to pop in this meeting, and they're probably going to see 3 guys, cheering up over father and son, play the Cat in the Cradle song or something. And
we got those too, with a lot of tears too.
It does make you think about, like, why do we have this brain with such capacity that we don't ever really get close to? And then as well, to Lisa's point earlier, that's why you can think about, like, the day of death is so much more important than the day of life, right? Because there's a lot of value in the good name that you create through your life, and that's exactly what people remember on our last days. So, but maybe we can turn the conversation over to this topic about why do people resist the change. We've heard powerful stories of change, some that you've even shared here on this show. So now why don't we dig into the why, right? The reason behind that resistance, and then what drives the resistance. So maybe in your experience, Jose, Lisa, and Doug, can you share with us your perspective on that why some have this resistance?
Well, part of it,
I think,
go ahead.
Thank you, Doug. Go ahead. I was going to say, I think I already have, so I was going to pass it on to someone else.
Part of the answer, I think, has to do with how leaders think about leadership. I mean, if you think of your job as a leader as getting people to move from point A to point B, you may be setting yourself up for failure. So I enjoyed the conversation about the childhood aspects, and Tullio mentioned parenting in his opening. My dear friend Peter Kessenbaum, a great workplace philosopher, said that the job of leaders is that, or the job of parents rather, is to help. They're 100% responsible for the way their own kids turn out, 100%. Because they're in charge of formation of behavior and all the rest. But the way they achieve that is to make sure that their kids understand that they're 100% responsible for the way they turn out. So it's a very important nuance that a lot of parents don't get, and a lot of leaders don't get. You analogize that to leadership in organizations. If you have a high level of commercial responsibility in an enterprise, you're a CEO, for example, you're 100% responsible for the way your company turns out and for the success or failure of a change initiative. But the way you achieve that is to make sure that everyone working with you in the enterprise feels that they're 100% responsible for the way that change turns out or the way the business performs. And so if you see your job as a leader just moving people from one current state to a future state, you're missing out on that rich environment of helping people understand and internalize the importance of making sure that everything works in the direction that to which they've agreed and aligned. So it's understanding the nature of leadership itself, I think, is really at the core of this.
I'll go. I feel like, honestly, why do people resist? I mean, that's really the question, right? Why do people resist the change when life is fluid? And I think that resistance, it really often arises from the need for stability during uncertainty. And I like to use the acronym FEAR is false evidence appearing real. I don't know if any of you have heard that before. It's been around for a bit. And, you know, this is this belief that there is, you know, unknown. It really does heighten the need for control. So I think underneath the resistance is the inability to be what I call fiercely flexible in life. And I don't know where we're taught that. Where are we taught the skills of resilience? You know, one of the things I didn't mention at the very beginning is that in 2020, I decided to take on the education system. And because I believe that we as leaders can be conscious leaders, I think organizations can become conscious enterprises when the leaders are conscious. I also believe that teachers can become conscious educators. And where are we teaching young people, our children, these very important skills about resilience, about emotional intelligence? And so I believe that resistance really does happen often because there's a threat, and that threat is really just not a behavior that's been taught how to navigate through. And I think when more leaders and just individuals that open up the dialogue for something different, I think it really will be more of a pathway to releasing the barriers that are often there, that are just one of those. It's an unconscious, almost an invisible barrier that we often experience. So I think that's one of the great reasons why people resist.
Yeah, I think without a doubt too. And Jose, earlier you were saying, you know, in terms of uncertainty, right? So that's why people, you know, put up this resistance. Yeah. Is there more to that you want to maybe add, or?
Yeah, I agree with Doug that our definition or our view on what leadership is a big part of the problem. But I think that our society's view of what living is fundamentally a bigger part of the problem. We think of life through the stories we've built about what our structures are, what our society is, what our organizations are, what leadership is, what a boss is, what an employee is, what being employed means, what having a job means. All of these things create a narrative, if you will, around how our brains see ourselves, how we see our relationship with one another. Life itself is meant to serve life. That's what we do. When Doug was talking about, you know, being responsible for our children, right? That's the innate desire that we have. And Lisa said she didn't know where we learn to not, you know, take care. Paraphrasing, of course, I believe that we get it beaten out of us. Our schools, our communities, our workplaces basically tell us that we have no agency, and so therefore we have no agency. And it's this self-correcting, or uncorrecting process of the more you believe you have no agency, the less agency you have, and the less someone else has the power over you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so I think, just to wrap that up, Tullio, I think the understanding that what drives human behavior is essentially this desire to connect, this desire to help, this desire to be with. And we don't allow those desires to express themselves, and we end up with what we've got.
Yeah. And part of the problem also is this desire to be helpful, sometimes masked in a way to shelter someone, like your children, from challenges, that you give so much to them that in actuality, you're not really helping, because you actually cannot build resilience and endurance without any form of hardship. Hardship is what creates resilience and endurance. So if you're sheltering your employees, you're sheltering your children from going through the experience of being challenged, having to figure stuff out, scraping their knees, hurting themselves along the way, taking the risk, learning the lessons, then you don't come out of it on the other side with the sense of endurance and resilience that is necessary to actually find fulfillment. Because once you achieve that endurance, then what comes out of that is a sense of peace. And that peace is what produces a sense of fulfillment. Yeah. And we're trying so hard to just make it so easy that it actually, the opposite is happening.
Teach them to fish.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see that happening in all parts of society. I even think of, the way that we manage our debt in this country, right? We were going through this COVID, we were going through the financial crisis, due to mortgages. And what do? There's always this safety net, right? And when there's that safety net, we don't want everyone to go through all that pain. And then it ends up hurting society in bigger ways. There's in our regular podcast with our guests, there's a question I've started to ask everyone around purpose. And I'm curious, I want to ask it here because I'm interested in all your thoughts around this. And it's, we're talking about change, right? And the resistance that happens with change. But what would you say the importance is of having a well-defined purpose, maybe when we as individuals are struck with, some kind of change? What, Jose, sorry to put you in the hot seat, but you want to kick us off?
No, I'm going to start us off by, unfortunately, sort of changing the language a little bit, and I apologize for this.
No, it's all good.
So I think of purpose as something we're all born with. And each of us has our own unique purpose. And that purpose isn't made as in like, I'm going to be a this or I'm going to be a that, but that I have a certain set of gifts to bring to the world. And that's my purpose. And to express as that set of gifts, that purpose, to the best of my ability. That's what I believe purpose is. What's the impact that I can make? What's the impact that we can make collectively? That to me is how I frame purpose. As we have purpose, what we need to do is understand what impact we want to make with that purpose, individually and collectively.
Yeah. It's a different way to think about it for sure. Yeah. Who'd like to go next? Lisa?
Yeah, sure. I'll go. Jose, I love what you said. I think we are all innately born with purpose, and yet most often we don't know what that purpose is. Sometimes unless we have a moment, we'll call it a dark night of the soul, or something that's been really painful in our lives, where we start to question, what is it all about? What is life all about? Why am I here? And these deep questions help the ability to unravel, or like I used the word before, is really uncoil these hidden gifts that are within us, within each and every one of us. And I like to think about our purpose as something that we live as a legacy versus leave as a legacy. And being able to get into the heart, get out of the mind, and connect with what it is that we're here to do, to imbue, to become, is, I think, extraordinarily fulfilling. I think there's a lot of people who are looking at doing that now. There's a lot of leaders that were doing things before and they just said, I can't do it. I mean, Jose, it sounded like that was something that happened to you. It was like, I can't do this anymore. I had a very similar experience. I can't do this work anymore. I need to do what is fulfilling my heart. And when we can get really deeply connected with our heart, we will find that purpose. We all have it. So again, we're talking about love, right? Stephen, when we originally started talking here, and I think that there is more of that conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you brought up love. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. It was just like, I mean, we need to be continually asking ourselves, what is the loving thing to do? And if you want to find, real purpose, as long as you're continually doing that, I think that will lead you there for a lot of people, which is why we talk about bliss and build love into scalable system. It's kind of thinking about the systems around you. How can you add some love into this, in some small way? And little by little makes a lot, and along that process and on that journey, as you're doing that, you mentioned like legacy. This is how you start living the legacy. It doesn't become a one-off thing. It just becomes a continual thing, right? It's not a one-off random act of kindness. It's a continual act of love in some way or another. And so, yeah, I'm glad you kind of circled this to love. Doug, hop in here too on purpose for Mike's question.
Yeah, I love the comments that have come up so far on purpose from Jose and Lisa. The idea of figuring out the gifts that you're going to bring to the world is super important. And I think Jose earlier talked about how society kind of beats generosity out of us starting at a young age. And so when he mentioned gifts, I thought of the idea of gifted and talented programs in schools. And I thought how retrograde those are in the sense that they teach students who are really adept academically that they're somehow better than the kids that aren't able to enter those programs, and they teach the kids that are left out of those programs they're not good enough to join. So there's so many examples of where we just really trash the idea of unleashing humanity and generosity and potential in human beings all around us. And how do we find our impact? I think about purpose. I also think about meaning, which is our personal relationship to our purpose. And again, my dear friend Peter Kessenbaum said that if you can identify the meaning of your existence, then you can transcend time. And so if you can generate a sense of time internally, rather than feeling pressured by time as some sort of alien external force, it changes everything. It changes your whole life. It changes your approach to leadership, to your relationships, to everything you do in life. And personally, I will never retire. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm never going to retire because I love what I do. And it's just, on and on it goes. But, again, society beats things out of us. They teach us, well, when you hit 65, you got to retire. And then you're going to go, check out your 401k and, go on vacation and all that stuff. Well, where's the meaning? Where is the essential purpose and meaning in that? And how are you bringing your gifts to the world if you're just sitting on a beach someplace? So there's so many aspects of this. What is the loving thing to do? I love the Bliss Business Podcast. What's the loving thing to do? We have a great opportunity here to build love and humanity into our AI large language models. Yeah, we should be really, really, really focused on that. Build generosity, build love into those models. and optimize those things, and not build in what some faction in society thinks we should do to re-engineer society at some given moment in time. But let's build universal values into those things, because they're going to have such a huge effect on us going forward.
Yeah, and just to underline that, it's so vitally important, because having worked myself with AI for quite a while, even before this latest push in generative AI, is so that AI will optimize toward whatever goal you give it to. And so if we're going to give it a singular goal of pursuit of profit, right, that's all it's going to optimize toward, and it's going to wreak havoc on all the other aspects of our lives. It has nothing in that toward love or toward empathy or toward these very important guide rails. And if we don't have those conversations now, so that it's just getting more and more infused into what we're doing, we're just setting ourselves up for just major disaster. So I'm glad you brought up the AI. I just wanted to underline that, because we need to be having more conversations like this. We need to be having the AI development people who are in that area be thinking about empathy, be thinking about love, be thinking about conscious capitalism when you're doing all this. Otherwise, AI is going to be cold and malicious, and we're going to steer us down. We're going to go backwards a little bit, and we're going to do it at scale. I kind of think if we don't do it right. So, we've talked about kind of some solutions here, I think, for this this issue of animosity, and we've talked resilience, which I think was kind of a great point, right? How can we be more resilient? I think studies have shown, if you want to see successful humans, teaching them grit, early on in some way or another, it plays a major role in there. So what are some of the other solutions that we can think about here for turning animosity into understanding, or building trust with teams and communities during all this times of change, and ensuring kind of generosity wins over resentment? What we've talked about a few. What comes to mind for our panel here? Connect. Absolutely.
Co-creation.
Yes. Which is connecting. Commitment. I love this. We got 3 C's here. Yeah. This is connection. Let's start with each of these and then dive in. So connection, we see everything in society around us just being more and more disconnected. People trying to get other people to resent each other, and trying to leverage that into power. How can we help with connection and growing connection among each other? How can we get through this a little more gracefully than we are?
Well, before we think about, I think, how do we overcome it, I think we need to understand the power of connection. Connection is what gets us to build a community. Without it, we're not. Standing by ourselves in our own space, disconnected from everyone else. The story is the power, not life, because we're not engaged with one another. We don't care for one another, and we cannot care abstractly, right? It's the old thing about, if we show the picture of the African child who's starving and we tell people the child's name, then money pours out. But if we tell them that 1 million kids are dying, the money doesn't pour in, right? It's about connection. And so engaging with one another in a real human living way is a starting point. We have to do that more. And we have to stop this story of disconnection by separating ourselves from one another. And how we connect, and the power of connection beyond that, I think, is that once we realize that we're all still just humans, no matter what role we play, no matter whether we're leaders or we should be leaders or we can lead, It's all possible. It's just a matter of coming together from a place of recognizing that we're humans and we need to look at each other in the eye, not looking at each other in the resume.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where the difference is.
I always say make connection a goal. I mean, so if you're having those tough conversations, those tough things, make connection a goal. So once we focus on connection, I think then we can co-create, right, Lisa? So talk a little about your word co-create.
Yeah, and I do want to just add one thing that Jose said is that we are all interconnected. We cannot not be. We are a lattice, right? This is humanity. And it is a false belief that we're not.
Mm.
And so what happens when we have when we accept and embrace our humanness, that we are all interconnected, and our thoughts and feelings and beliefs and our emotions and our actions are going to directly and indirectly impact everyone that is in our sphere and not necessarily in our sphere. And when we can embrace that and take responsibility for it, the process of co-creation is very empowering. And we then get to know that it's because of our humanness that we need each other. We need each other. And I think that's the importance of co-creation, because it then builds trust, and build trust provides transformation to happen.
Yeah, and I think
something I just wanted to add. I had a mentor once that said to me, cancer is a spiritual disease. I said, what do you mean? And he said, what is a cancer cell? It's a healthy cell that decides to separate itself from the rest of the cells and invites a bunch of other cells to do the same thing. And in that separation, in that disconnection, you get cancer. And that's exactly what you're describing in society. There's a lot of cancer today.
Well, technically, there's actually a lot of cancerous cells that are important for the body to have. It's the ones that go rogue,
Right,
that create that metastasize.
Yeah.
And so, we need those as well. Like we need viruses to be healthy.
Right.
How can we work in communion, right? To your point, Tullio. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a point here I was going to make just real quick to Lisa's point about connections. So there was a study that was recently done. I'm not sure if it's totally been published yet, but it and you may have already heard of this. It was a study done on study of cholesterol, and so they had these doctors feed different bunnies different foods, very organic, clean foods, all the way to like the worst foods you would possibly never give to a bunny. And the findings came out, at least initially, that the bunny that was getting the worst foods to eat had the lowest cholesterol. And so this baffled the researchers. And so they wanted to go in and see, how was it that this outcome had resulted. And so it was in the manner that the researcher was feeding the bunny. It would feed it, it would talk to it, it was petting the bunny. And so now the researchers have even found that maybe perhaps the mood that we are in when consuming food could impact our own health. So I just thought I'd leave that there, because obviously that researcher had created some kind of connection with that animal, and it turned out to be a better result. So just to the points about connection, right, and the importance of it.
Yeah, and to Lisa's point, and even to yours, Mike, is that we're so interconnected that people don't realize. I mean, we are systems within systems within systems within systems. It's extremely complex. There's so much complexity here, which is why if you could just simplify that, Mike, like if you're putting love into something as simple as that, like feeding this one part of this one system in a certain way, you see it somehow bloom, somehow do better.
Yeah.
Doug, let's get to commitment here.
I would love to. I've got to react to Michael's story about the book, though, because I have a friend, Paul Zak. He's a neuroeconomist at Claremont University. He wrote a book called The Moral Molecule about oxytocin, and it's the trust molecule. So if you give someone a hug and you get like 20 minutes of a natural high, it makes you feel good for at least 20 minutes. And it's also called the trust molecule. And so at Morningstar, we've been experimenting with wearables, and we can actually measure people's reaction to various parts of trainings and workshops that we deliver in real time, like second to second. So this idea of the petting and the reaction is quite interesting to me.
All right, wait, Doug, explain this again. You've got wearables and you are real-time monitoring.
Yeah.
And the company will probably shock people if they misbehave.
Yeah, we'll deliver electric shocks and stimulate attentiveness. So Paul Zak, he's got a great website and software and the whole bit, but you can measure those things in real time.
Okay.
But so commitment is quite important. Keeping commitments is the basis for trust. Keeping commitments is the very definition of integrity. That's what the definition of integrity is, the degree to which one keeps commitments. And so commitments have language, they have structure, and they have a life cycle. And that's the atomic structure of work. There's no such thing as things to do apart from commitments. We do things because we promise to do them, either in a meta sense and an overall job description sense, or in a real, time daily sense. So commitment keeping is crucial to everything that happens. It's the second principle of Morningstar. It's fundamental to law everywhere in the world. Imagine a world where every single person always did what they said they were going to do 100% of the time. What an amazing world that would be to live in. And again, not reality, but that's not the point. The point is, the closer we get to that in an organizational context, the more space we open up for human happiness and teamwork and high performance and feeling good and all the rest of it. So commitment keeping is absolutely crucial. It's the foundation of all accountability. Polarity management is a job of every leader. What does it mean to be a successful leader? Well, yeah, you get stuff done, but you also have to do it in a way that elevates the human spirit and helps people feel good about what they're doing, and helps people understand that they're accountable. They're 100% accountable for living up to their own commitments. So commitments are really, that's the foundation of everything we do in work. And so helping people get their heads around that and understand that and exercise that is crucially important.
Yeah. And one, I think that within self-management, Doug, right, it's imperative. So maybe we can stay with you, Doug, and we can talk a little bit more about organizational structures, give you a chance maybe to talk a little bit more about self-management, perhaps versus a hierarchical structure. And maybe how those structures or those models play either into fueling or diffusing what we've talked about today, the resistance to change. Any thoughts on that?
I would say that it's easier to crowdsource opinions and thoughts and strategies and innovations and good ideas in a network structure where everyone has an equal voice equal right to be heard. A structure is absent force, where no one has any authority to tell other people what to do or to fire anyone unilaterally. I would say it's easier to source those kinds of things in a self-managed organization. And at the same time, in a hierarchical, traditional, bureaucratic, top-down organization, it's absolutely possible for leaders to employ open leadership techniques, have crowdsourced innovation workshops or open spaces, or liberating structures. There's a whole portfolio of open social technologies that can be employed to give everybody a voice in the enterprise. So I would say it's easier in a self-managed organization. It's probably more natural, and people are probably more used to it in that kind of a structure. But these open ideas can be employed in any organization. It just takes willpower on the part of the people that are willing to lead those things.
Good
Doug,
thoughts.
do you have your
for
org
sure.
chart handy? Your org chart handy, Doug, with the I know he's got it. He's got it within reach somewhere. Yeah. So if you're there you go. So if you're not
which way
on
is
video,
That's
It's
the
just
original cloud.
it's like a constellation of connecting dots from different areas. If I were to describe it for those just listening, not your traditional org chart, top down, pyramid kind of thing. Where Lisa, Jose, you want to jump in here at all on the self-management discussion?
Sure. I really want to acknowledge Doug in being so pioneering with such a large organization. And I find it to be just incredible, really. I love that your org chart looks like a mind map, which is where my mind always goes. Hierarchical structures within organizations is just old school. Period. It's old school. And not only, talk about lack of agency, but also absolute disempowerment. And that's not where Earth is going. It's not where humanity needs to go to in the next evolution of consciousness. And, I can look back and, this was a long time ago. Back in 2010, I had an organization. There's, at the time, there was only about 15 employees. I had some wonderful, wonderful people, but it took them forever and a day to get to work. And so I thought, well, why don't I just take it virtual? Typically ahead of my time a little bit. So I employed a consulting company and took the company virtual. And people thought, and I just were like, how are you going to manage everybody? And I said, I bet I'm going to get more productivity than I've ever had my entire life. And it was a team effort. I brought everybody together. This is what we would like to do. I don't like that there are days out of the week, given that there are snowstorms and, people would take 2 hours to get to work. I'm like, this is crazy. I don't want to
endangering their life. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so everybody said, you know what, we're going to make a commitment. And everybody found a space within their home or in their apartment or whatever. And we took 6 months and we created a beautiful work at home environment. And there was more connection than there had ever been in that environment. And so I will say that, that self-management model is such an amazing way to bring people in that they feel heard. There is a collective and a collaborative decision-making. They feel like they're part of the organization. And I had someone with me for 13 years, and they thought for years that she was the owner. And I'll be honest with you, I was like, great. Perfect.
Beautiful.
It was wonderful. It didn't matter to me. Everybody was so happy. That fueled me.
Nice.
So for me, self-management or what we like to call co-management and co-ownership are the future. I think I agree wholeheartedly with Lisa and with Doug. I especially like to think of the network structure serving the 3 C's we just talked about, right? It is so much easier to connect with someone when there isn't a hierarchy issue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is so much easier to co-create with someone when you don't feel like that someone is in another team and another organization and another division and another department, and it is so much easier to commit to someone when you're doing it out of respect, not out of having to because the structure says you have to. And so I'm going to keep this short, but it seems to me that really moving towards a self-management model, however we define that, is really the only way forward to do those things we've just talked about.
Hey.
Long term.
Yeah,
Love how you brought that all together, Jose.
That was. I'm saying this is getting artistic here. We're pulling back into the conversation. Tullio, where do you want to go?
Yeah, I think at this point, this has been an incredible conversation. Absolutely incredible. And you know what I love about these things is I always learn something new, and that's wonderful. And so, but before we wrap up, it'd be great to just kind of hear a little bit. 2 things. One, I'd love to get your one takeaway that you think leaders should remember when dealing with change. Let's start with Doug.
You have to listen to everyone affected by change, and you have to invite people on a journey toward your envisioned destination. You don't get to command people unless you're in the military. It's a question of invitational leadership versus impositional leadership. Those are 2 different things. And so an open leadership approach of invitation-based leadership is crucial in this new world of work, networked AI world. And it starts with personal depth. And that's courage, it's ethics, it's caring, kindness, compassion, nurturing, support, encouragement, empathy, all the things that we've talked about today. It's super clear about reality and constraints and resources and opportunities. And it's about having a vision of a desired future state into which you can invite people and not impose on them to march toward your vision of the future.
Amazing. Lisa, what are your thoughts? What's a key takeaway leaders should take from this?
Two words or 2 phrases, authenticity and intellectual humility. I believe in resonant leadership, which I think is something that Doug was kind of saying. For me, I believe it's how do we lead from behind? How do we lead others by leading them from behind? That we have their back. We have the back of people who are dedicating their lives to our vision or our mission. And how can we imbue that for them to feel as empowered as they can be? And I would say that's really, those are, it is about having the ethics and the competencies for being a model human being. And it's nothing more than that. I mean, the responsibility to be as persevering of impeccability I think that's really the new way in which this new wave of the next generation of leadership could thrive, is in being impeccable.
I've heard take off the mask and be powerfully vulnerable and human. Stop wearing a mask. Take it off. I love that. Jose, what do you think it should be?
Totally agree with Lisa, and I'd like to paraphrase Doug, because I think Doug stole my words. Basically, I think it's not about leading change. It's leading with vision and inviting change. That's what a leader should be doing. And the invitation isn't a hands-off invitation. It's a collaboration. It's back to those 3 C's again. It's about connecting, co-creating, right? And committing to one another what it is that we are trying to move forward towards. Not that I impose it, but that we can see it together and we can co-create it together.
Wonderful. And finally, we want to give something to people watching that they can take action, a micro action they can take this week. What's that one micro action a leader can take this week to lead change with more empathy and generosity? Let's start with you, Lisa.
Listen. Don't speak. Listen. Listen to the concerns of what comes up. Listen to discomforts. Listen to fears. And then go back and contemplate. Go back to a quiet stillness and really reflect. And then, only then, act.
Brilliant. Thank you. Jose, one micro action a leader could do this week to lead with more empathy and generosity.
See the life in everyone you touch. Mm-hmm. Understand that life is seeking to serve life. And that when you diminish them to a role, to a title, you're diminishing life itself. Let that sink in. Let you be able to connect with the life in each and every one of them. In yourself and in others, because we often diminish ourselves to our roles and don't allow our humanity to shine. And that, to me, if we can do that, and it just takes a moment of every day to connect with that, it starts to change the way we see our organizations, our world, and one another.
That is deep. Thank you, Jose. And Doug?
I would encourage leaders to get a little notebook and carry it around with them for 1 week and record every business conversation that they have during the week. And assuming they're working in a traditional organization and not a self-managed organization, which is 99% of leaders today, identify in the notebook which of those conversations involve directives and then turn those into requests. So you're consciously flipping the script on being a directive leader, and you go from imposing to inviting.
I invite you to take us home, Stephen.
Well, I've loved this conversation today. I mean, if we step back and we look that 3/4 of the workforce is disengaged and a percentage of those actively so, I just think of that as sort of this great tragedy of this opportunity to help people be more empowered, build more meaning into their lives. And we're doing the opposite, right? We're just having people kind of open up a vein, let the company suck life out of them when it doesn't have to be that. And it's often just even just a small little paradigm shift of just how they view the work they're doing, you know, in service of others, a lot of ways. And it's a great tragedy. And so I'm hopeful that this conversation at least will have people thinking a little bit about toward this problem that we've got worldwide right now. And things, I'm optimistic for the future because I know where consciousness is going and I know what it's going to demand from us. And it's all these things that we're talking about here. And I think the younger generations are getting that sooner, getting to that point sooner and understanding that sooner. So I am optimistic. These are definitely scary times with AI and, you know, all the things that are going on and all the disconnection in the world that we're creating, but very optimistic for the future. Thank you all for this amazing conversation. This was wonderful. And for our listeners, thank you for listening and stay tuned for more insightful discussions here on the Bliss Business Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.